kind of finish things off, from that common problems and solutions workshop that I did, I also made sure to add some adaptations to those traditional sex therapy concepts, because all of those ones that I listed there are pretty heteronormative, embedded in traditional models. Maybe EFT is the exception to that, and it's not even really a sex therapy concept. It's just a concept that I think is very helpful in application with sex therapy. So most of those models have, inherent patriarchy. Not everybody has had the privilege of having scientific, holistic sex education, like hopefully we have. There was an empirical study done a few years ago on what sex therapists use to adapt their concepts to account for the issue of most of our models being very heteronormative and patriarchal in origin. Out of that article, they named 3 different principles that seem to be consistent among sex therapists: a non-judgmental acceptance, training and experience with sexual diversity, and a social constructionist analysis of it. So social constructionism, I love it. You might have already known that from this presentation. I also did social constructionism research in my master's program. And that master's research was called "Let's Talk About Sex, How Men Do It." So I spent some time looking at, from a male perspective, and using social construction to understand better what some of the male experiences were around sexuality. But this was that research was done a while ago. So I'm not sure how applicable it is still in this current day and age. So yeah, I want to talk about social constructionism. That's the theory that people develop knowledge in the world in a social context. And much of what we perceive as reality depends on our shared assumptions. So from a social constructionist perspective, many things we take for granted and believe are objective reality are actually socially constructed, and thus can change as society changes. And that's really a message that I want to tell clients too. These attitudes that we feel, these fears, are manifestations of a social construction. And the architects of that social construction were colonial, white privileged males. And so it is not a good social construction of what's actually happening. And when you actually listen to the lived experiences of individuals within it, you see how many of those shared assumptions are embedded in how they're speaking. Just like when James Corden was talking about like using old tropes of the shared assumptions of like the pie on a windowsill, right? Like that's from Bugs Bunny cartoons, right? That's common knowledge that he thinks everyone's going to be able to identify with as he's talking about this, trying to construct this message. So, and that's also really the lens in which the fat phobia is being looked at, is through the social construction of looking at fat as an epidemic. That's a social construction. That is not a medically based construction. That is not based on intrapsychic factors. That is not based on a medical model. It is based on social construction. So 5 techniques came about from the analysis of sex therapists. And so these are the ones that I present every time and suggest that they really need to be used with fat clients as well. So normalizing, right? Like we all normalize. I think that's a pretty basic one. There's nothing wrong with you for experiencing this. This is normal. Horizontalizing. So trying to actually understand all the intersections of phenomenon at the same level. So not prioritizing different lenses of identity or intersectionality. So going off of, so what else, you're a female, how does that impact things? Fat, how does that impact? Family of origin, how does that impact? And so putting all of them out on the table without a certain like prioritization or hierarchy of it. Affirmation, so affirmative practice. So affirming that there is nothing inherently wrong with your body, with how it looks. And you can still have satisfying sexual activity, period. The next one, reflective practice. So this is really why I think I've even been doing it in this workshop, catching myself how many times I've used the word obese when I don't want to. And so that's an important part of just understanding that we all have been experiencing society from these similar lenses, and we need to keep tabs on maybe especially those who have more privilege, really be able to keep tabs on, okay, is this still respectful? Is this languaging still helpful? How can I keep reflecting on my practice to make sure that I'm being as inclusive with my language as possible? And then, of course, a non-pathologizing attitude. So this kind of really goes without saying, based on the last 2.5 hours, is that we are not pathologizing weight. We do not have a clue what that means for an individual until we start talking to them about it. And we cannot assume that it is inherently even a negative experience that individuals are having. There are, there's some kinks or some play that can be done around. Some of you might have heard of like feederism. There can be feederism. There's some good stuff out there. There's some bad stuff out there within that. But there can be a place where individuals incorporate or embody fatness in a way as part of their sexual experiences. And so we would be doing a huge disservice if we ever pathologized how they're adapting to make their sex lives better. And that's, maybe this is really the primary principle or the thing to remember most about today, the non-pathologizing attitude about fat. And watching ourselves, do we have any of those biases underneath? I know that I was exposed to lots of them. I know that every time I visited my parents for years and years, the first thing that they would do was size me up and down and make a comment about my weight. Oh, you've been eating more. And that for me as a male pales in comparison to what the experience as a female would be with anything similar to that. Okay, so that's all of the sex therapy concepts. I want to pass it over to Angela here to give us a few other resources, suggestions of where we can go as sex therapists.
Thanks, Jason. So these are 3 books that I found very useful in sex therapy with fat people, especially fat women. The first one I would suggest is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. This is probably one of the best pieces of work in relation to just being able to identify that you need to love yourself in the way that you are. And it's a fantastic resource for your clients and for yourselves. The next two books are all about the adaptations to being a fat person. How do you actually have sex? Where Big Love really talks about acceptance at all sizes, and Curvy Girl Sex has a lot of positions that incorporate the use of aids, like Jason had talked about before. So I really do recommend these three resources for clients uh, for sex, fat sex. The next thing, oops, pardon me. Whoa.
So while Angela is finding the next slide there, I also want to remark on Emily Nagoski's other more recent book called Burnout. And that does a tremendous job of also discussing the influences of patriarchy and misogyny that are deeply embedded in all of our social constructs. Are you ready, Angela?
Yeah, thank you. The next resources I have for anybody who's interested in more of the fat phobia, the history of fat phobia. The first book there is by Christopher North. It's Fat, A Cultural History of the History Stuff of Life. It's a very academic kind of book, and it talks about everything associated fat, from the unctuousness, the feel of fat, the taste of fat, to how we actually changed to a society that despises fat. The Fearing the Black Body is all about the racial origins of fat phobia. I highly recommend that book as well. It's got a lot of great information. And finally, The Anti-Diet is written by Christy Harrison, who's a registered dietitian, and it really does go over disproving the diet culture and the obsessiveness we have over it. So I highly recommend these three books. And moving forward, what do we do with this information? So this information is really hopefully to get people to feel that there is an opportunity to experience pleasure in your own way and at every size. So in the net workshop I'm coming up within the new year is pleasure at every size. So I hope to see some faces there as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the idea of pleasure at every size as being the next place to go to really operationalize the findings in the research, because there's still a lot more research that needs to be done. But there is, I think, a starting point that we can be at for actually really being able to help these individuals and couples in our practice. I also would like to add the book, The Body is Not an Apology, by Sonia Renee Taylor, as a, I want to say, fundamental understanding of what our fat clients are experiencing. That when they are in the world, they are feeling like they have to apologize for their mere existence. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry. You know, that's how that shame manifests and remains present in that person's attention for maybe most of their waking hours, maybe. And we want to be able to move into what is not working to what is going to work, which is pleasure. Pleasure has really been, I think, the focal point of where we need to go as a profession in sex therapy. That this is all about pleasure for pleasure's sake for most sexual experiences. It's not intercourse at every size. It's not rounding the bases of the baseball metaphor at every size. This is pleasure, and pleasure is very unique and intimate to every person. And that's also what I think needs to be done when we're all thinking about our own sexuality and our preferences and our likes and our dislikes, is what do I really think about this? Not what should I like? What does pornography show me that I should like, or erotica or social media show me that I should be liking? But what's really, really true for me? Taking away all of that other stuff. What does my body actually respond to? And how can I learn that? And then how can I express that to myself and possibly to a partner? So that brings us to the conclusion of our morning, or whenever you're watching this. I have lots of references. I would love to share all of them. You know, anybody who wants references, please let me know. You know, I can make your lives not easy by sending you hundreds of pages, but it's all there. And I think it's tremendously interesting to look at how the obesity-led research is different than the fat studies-led research. And just it's night and day, really, in terms of what those assumptions are that are embedded in their research. So yeah, please let us know about that. We will send our live participants here today a copy so that you can watch the video as well. Please send me any questions, send us any questions that come up along the way. I'd love to be able to collaborate, to build a community here around helping professionals that are interested in these areas, because I think that we need a whole community to do this. It's not going to come from a privileged white guy in Canada. It's going to be from all of us working together. And so I want to share this. This is not mine. I want to really share this and invite us all to be working with each other together on this, because this is also not an easy area to think about, to talk about, to know, you know, how people are going to respond, what some of the languaging is. Even just if you were to talk about fat versus obese with clients, you know, that might be a whole session right there. You know, why is it that fat has become such a bad connotation for them? What does it mean? What would it be helpful to reclaim that word for you, as it appears helpful in much of the literature? But it may not, some clients may really not be ready for that at that time, and that's okay too.